First, there was Andrew Luck. Then, there was Trevor Lawrence. And in 2024, there was Caleb Williams, a prospect so exceptional at every aspect of the game that he couldn't miss in the NFL. He was a guaranteed franchise quarterback for whoever found themselves with the number 1 overall pick, the next in line to receive the coveted generational tag. Or maybe the scouts got it wrong. His first season was a letdown by almost every possible standard, leaving doubts in more than a few minds. Despite the physical talent, there's a real chance that Caleb is closer to Anthony Richardson than he is to Peyton Manning. Today, we decipher whether Caleb Williams fooled everyone. Caleb grew up in Washington, D.C., attending Gonzaga High School. Already sizing up well at 6'2" and 190 pounds, he started looking like a prototypical quarterback early in his career, throwing for 172 yards and 3 touchdowns with no picks against Bishop McNamara, a game that was just his 4th at the high school level. He then developed further as a sophomore, winning a Washington Catholic Athletic Conference championship with Gonzaga. In the final postseason game against the DeMatha Stags, Caleb put up 7 total touchdowns, 3 through the air, 3 on the ground, and 1 on a 9-yard reception on a trick play. He threw for 358 yards and ran for 113 more, plus the 9 receiving yards. At the end of that season, he was first-team All-Region and the DC Gatorade Player of the Year with his 3,000 total yards and 36 total touchdowns. Caleb Williams was the total package as a young QB. He had speed and strength like the modern mobile guys, but the accuracy and decision-making of classic pros. Recruiters were all over him. He continued to garner accolades as a junior, but his production did dip noticeably. Through his final 2 games of 2019, Caleb threw just 1 touchdown to a pair of interceptions, had just 1 net rushing yard on 32 carries, and had a completion percentage barely above 50. Those 2 disappointing performances led to a loss at the end of the regular season and a first-round playoff exit for the defending WCAC champs. Now, not all of this could have been Caleb's fault, but it does serve as the first instance of a troubling pattern. When other teams are aware of his talent, they plan for it, and he folds. Nevertheless, as the 2020 high school season was canceled due to the global pandemic, Caleb exited DC as the number 1 quarterback in his recruiting class and was brought to the Oklahoma Sooners by head coach Lincoln Riley. He was expected to be the backup as a freshman, maybe to even redshirt behind supposed future first-rounder Spencer Rattler. Instead, Rattler found himself crumbling in games early in the 2021 season, and Caleb was asked to step in just 6 weeks into his college career. Against the Texas Longhorns, the freshman debuted down 35-17, before leading 4 touchdown drives and 7 total scoring drives to come back and win. From there, he became the established starter at OU, going 5-2 as QB1, only losing to 13th-ranked Baylor and 7th-ranked Oklahoma State. His final game of the year was an upset win over the Oregon Ducks in the Alamo Bowl, and Caleb's solid performances as a freshman made him a leading Heisman candidate going into the 2022-23 season. Caleb followed Lincoln Riley to USC when the latter was hired in the 2021 offseason, and the hype followed him. Against a relatively weak Pac-12, the Trojans were the favorite in almost every game on their schedule after the additions of Williams and Riley. Luckily, the pair delivered. A 6-0 start, including 4 conference wins, was solid, before they rebounded from a close loss to the Utes with 5 more consecutive wins. Weak competition or not, Williams was averaging more than 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns per game, and he looked like a superhero while doing it. His rushing game took a hit at the collegiate level thanks to tougher defenders, but his speed and footwork made him a threat inside and outside of the pocket, forcing his way into plays that looked long dead. USC was 11-1, ranked 4th in the nation, and had earned the right to host the Pac-12 championship game against Utah. The Trojans had lost by just 1 point in a shootout before, and Caleb Williams had basically already wrapped up the Heisman Trophy with his exceptional season. All they needed was this win, which they were heavily favored to get, and they'd be back in the college football playoffs. Instead, Caleb and the offense buckled against an inferior Utah team. USC struck first and had a 17-3 lead early in the second quarter. After that, though, the offense disappeared. being outscored 44-3 for the rest of the game. Williams had a gaudy stat line, with 363 yards and 3 touchdowns, but he and the offense started the second half with 3 straight 3-and-out drives, and he followed their gasp-of-life touchdown with a red zone interception. The Heisman winner couldn't do anything to stop the landslide, and USC lost both the championship and their playoff chances. Even less discussed, the exact same thing happened a few weeks later in the Cotton Bowl against Tulane. 28 points in the first half, almost 500 total yards, and 5 touchdowns for Caleb, but multiple stalled drives and mistakes with the lead, including a safety and interception, both of which were answered with touchdowns by Tulane. People blamed the defense, but at a certain point, the quarterback needed to make the offense score points, especially in such big spots. It would have been great if Caleb had been able to bounce back from a hard end to 2022. He had a shiny new trophy and was all but guaranteed to be the number 1 pick in the next NFL draft. But all he did was coast on his reputation. 6 wins to start the year, all against unranked teams. The USC defense was bad enough that those games ended up still being contests, but at a certain point, Williams looked more like a stat patter than a superstar. And then, the real part of the schedule came, and the paper tiger side of Caleb returned. Against Notre Dame, Washington, Oregon, and Utah once again, the Trojans couldn't buy a meaningful win, and Caleb's numbers took a very noticeable dive. Only one of those 5 losses was by less than a touchdown, and the offense continued to give up after losing the lead. Caleb's offensive line and defense were huge factors in this, but the reigning Heisman Trophy winner was not without blame himself. The football season is here, and this year, I'll be using ProfitX as my go-to for season-long plays and player props. ProfitX is America's #1 sports prediction market, where you can win real money predicting sports in 40-plus states. You'll get better odds than traditional sports books because you're playing against others, not the house. With ProfitX, you can request your own odds, play with confidence, and get super fast payouts, straight to your bank, card, or even crypto. And here's the best part. Right now, if you sign up at ProfitX.co and use promo code TDK, you'll get up to $200 in profit cash on all your plays for the first 30 days. Sign up now at ProfitX.co and start winning real money predicting sports. Terms and conditions apply. It wasn't all bad in 2023. Caleb's completion percentage went up, and he kept showing off his impressive physicality and quarterbacking traits, but every counting stat nosedived. Even taking into account 2 fewer games. The issues were red flags, but not enough to bump down his draft stock in any significant way. Caleb was seen as a no-brainer #1 overall pick for the Chicago Bears, who got the pick via Carolina thanks to the trade that the Panthers had made to move up for Bryce Young the year prior. And for a franchise with such an awful history at the most important position in sports, Caleb was a blessing from the football gods to the Bears. After failing to develop Justin Fields, a top pick from 2021, it was time to move on to one of the best prospects in history. Caleb was selected first overall as expected, and he was named the starter before he even came to terms on his rookie deal. The narrative machine churned like it always did, with questions about his mentality, whether the Bears would ruin him, and if his excellent college stats could have been a mirage. Many of those doubters were hushed, but not silenced early in 2024, when the Bears got off to a surprising 4-2 record. Caleb flashed some of his elite passing ability in a Week 3 loss to the Colts, setting the Bears' rookie passing record with 363 yards, although it was in a loss. With a mediocre run game but elite receivers, it seemed like Caleb was just a week away from breaking out. They were considered a frisky playoff team going into their bye, but when they came out of it, something wasn't right. An unprecedented 10 losses in a row, with an offense averaging less than 14 points per game and putting up multiple touchdownless performances. Of course, Caleb still had his moments, but it was much closer to 2023 USC Caleb. All style and no substance. Lots of passing yards and not nearly enough passing touchdowns to sustain an NFL offense. Head coach Matt Eberflus was fired towards the tail end of the streak, and the goal became to lay a foundation for 2025. The issues were clear. A weak offensive line, a questionable run game, and a massive deficiency in the coaching department. The team managed a morale-boosting Week 18 win over the Packers, but even that was more of a defensive showcase than anything. Thanks to the general mismanagement of the Bears, it was easy to overlook just how underwhelming Caleb Williams had been as a rookie. In fairness to him, the leap to the NFL is hard, and the team around him wasn't ideal. But Caleb had played with bad O-lines, bad defenses, and much worse groups of weapons than he had in the NFL. And while his coaching was awful, it's hard to see that as the only difference between Williams and 2025 Offensive Rookie of the Year Jaden Daniels, selected one pick later, but much more successful with a less talented roster around him. At some point, blame has to be handed to Caleb, and there were a few key issues with his game as a rookie. First, he took too many sacks. Blame the O-line all you want, but no one held onto the ball as long as Chicago's number 18 in 2024, which may have led to hero plays in college, but caused almost 70 sacks in the big leagues. Speaking of the hero plays, Caleb managed to buy himself time, but didn't always take the big shots that made him famous at the amateur level. He threw 354 straight passes across 9 games without throwing a pick, both NFL rookie records, but something felt very 2020s Aaron Rodgers about it. Like, Caleb was more scared of a bad stat line than he was of losing. And finally, he wasn't leading late in games. Just like he showcased all throughout college, when the going got tough, he was quicker to hang his head than he was to pick up his teammates. Most of the Bears' losses down the stretch were very winnable games, but the offense failed when it mattered most. If that is a question of maturity or just plain apathy, Caleb might not have the Warriors' heart that a top-flight quarterback needs. In 2025, all of the pieces are in place for Caleb to shine. Chicago shelled out for the hottest head coaching prospect in recent memory, the Lions' Ben Johnson, who promises to present an exciting offense for the Bears. They completely rebuilt this offensive line, they drafted more top weapons for Caleb in Colston Loveland and Luther Burden, and the defense is still made up of elite personnel from top to bottom. And yet, the cracks are still showing. Preseason training camp clips showed more embarrassing misses, interceptions, and tantrums than the kind of plays we associate with Heisman Trophy winning Caleb. And let's be honest, he didn't do much to convince fans he was on the right track in Week 1. The pressure is massively on in this 2025 season, and Bears fans have to be worried about what they've seen so far. Right now, it looks like Caleb is taking his NFL experience for granted and coasting on his talent, just like he did in his junior years of both high school and college. If Caleb Williams can't find his competitive spirit and tap into his elite talent consistently at the NFL level, he might not be a bust, but he will be one of the most disappointing players in NFL history. 2025 is the test. It's all in front of him. Is he the guy? Or did he just manage to fool the NFL world into thinking he was? Let us know what you think in the comments.